The prairie had a way of swallowing sound, leaving only the low groan of the wind sliding across miles of empty land. For Elias Ward, that quiet had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. 9 years had passed since he'd last shared breakfast with another soul. 9 years since laughter or argument or conversation had echoed within the 4 wooden walls of his cabin. He'd grown comfortable with the quiet, too comfortable, maybe, but it was the only life he knew how to live anymore. His cabin sat on a slight rise overlooking the Red River, its timbers grey and sun-beaten, its windows smudged from dust storms and long winters. A rusted lantern hung by the door, swaying gently, tapping the wall like a knuckle, asking permission to enter. Elias stepped out each morning, with his coffee tin cup, and watched the horizon as though expecting something to appear, but nothing ever did. His days were a ritual carved deep into habit. At dawn he'd feed the horses, only 2 now, old as he was, and check the fencing along the southern pasture. By noon he'd patch whatever the night winds had pulled loose. Afternoon meant chopping wood, even in summer, because winter had a cruel memory and never forgot a man who underestimated it. At dusk he'd sit by his fire, boots crossed, listening to the pop of dry cedar, his mind drifting back to faces he tried to forget. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice startled him, hoarse, rusty, as if unused to forming words. Solitude had shaped him into something like a shadow moving through the world, rather than a man living in it. But that evening, cold, sharp, and blue around the edges, felt different. The sky carried a heavy stillness, as though the prairie held its breath. The air was slicing cold, the kind that seeped through wool and bone. Snow clouds rolled low, thick and bruised, dragging the day into darkness before its time. Elias pulled his coat tight and stepped onto the porch, scanning the horizon like he always did, though he expected nothing. That's when he saw it, a distant figure, small and staggered, moving against the wind with the stubborn persistence of someone fighting both nature and fate. Too slender to be a ranch hand, too unsteady to be a traveler on horseback. A lone silhouette, half frozen, drawing closer with each unbalanced step. Elias narrowed his eyes. After 9 silent years, someone was coming toward his door. The figure struggled through the snow-hushed twilight until she reached the foot of Elias's porch. Up close, he could see how cold had carved itself into her, her breath coming in sharp, painful bursts, her hands trembling inside worn leather gloves. Her dark hair, braided with small beads and strips of dyed fiber, was stiff with frost. She looked up at him with eyes both fierce and exhausted, almond-shaped and sharp, despite the shivering that racked her frame. "Warmth, please, warmth," she whispered, voice catching, more breath than sound. It wasn't English at first, just a plea in her own tongue, but the meaning carried through sheer desperation. She repeated it again in slow, accented English, the words fragile as winter branches. Elias froze, one hand still on the doorframe. It had been years since anyone had come this far out, and far longer since anyone had asked him for anything. Instinct told him to be cautious. The frontier taught a man to measure strangers carefully. Lives often depended on that. Yet the woman swayed on her feet, and caution lost its grip. He stepped aside without another word. She staggered inside. The sudden shift from icy wind to stale cabin warmth made her knees buckle, and Elias caught her elbow just before she collapsed. Her skin was like ice beneath the hide cloak. He guided her toward the hearth, where embers still glowed from his supper fire, and tossed in more wood until flames leapt to life, pushing back the cold. For a moment she simply crouched close to the fire, hands extended, eyes closed, mumbling something soft in Comanche, a prayer maybe, or a thank you. Then she pulled back her hood, revealing a face that had seen hardship but not defeat. High cheekbones, wind-cracked lips, and the quiet pride of her people. "My name is Tala," she said once her voice steadied. "I was traveling with my kin, north across the river. Storm came fast. Too fast." She shook her head, remembering. "I lost the trail. Lost them." Elias handed her a tin cup of steaming broth. She accepted it with both hands, grateful down to her bones. For a long moment they studied each other, two solitary lives both shaped by loss, each unsure of the other, yet bound by the warmth of a single fire. Finally Elias cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You can stay," he said, "till the storm passes." Tala nodded, relief flickering across her tired eyes. And with that simple exchange, Elias Ward's 9-year silence cracked, just enough for someone else's breath to enter. The storm did not relent the next day, nor the day after. Snow piled high against the sides of the cabin, turning the world outside into a white, shifting silence. Inside, the warmth of the fire painted the walls in flickering amber, making the small room feel almost alive. It had been a long time since Elias had shared this space with anyone, and the presence of another human being, especially one so quiet and watchful, made the air feel strange and new. Tala spent the first morning sleeping beneath a heap of blankets. Her exhaustion ran deep, carved into her like scars from an old blade. Elias busied himself with chores, boots thudding softly on the wooden floorboards. He kept glancing toward her, as if to convince himself she was truly there. By evening, she was sitting upright by the fire, hands wrapped around a warm tin cup. The flames cast shifting light across her face, revealing strength beneath the fatigue. "You live alone here?" she asked, her voice gentle and accented, each word chosen with care. 9 years, Elias replied, poking the fire with an iron poker. "Long time to get used to it." She studied him thoughtfully. "No one gets used to being alone. They just learn how to wear it." Elias wasn't sure how to respond to that. He shrugged, uncomfortable with how close her words struck to the truth. Little by little, the quiet between them softened into conversation. Tala told him of her tribe's roots, south in summer, north in winter, the camps that moved with the buffalo herds, the way the land changed with each season. Her voice carried pride, but sometimes a shadow crossed her features, a sadness for things lost or left behind. Elias listened more than he spoke. When he finally shared his own story, it came out haltingly, as if unused to daylight. He told her about his wife gone 10 winters now, and the child they had lost before that. How he tried to bury his grief under work, under silence, under empty horizons, but it had clung to him like a second skin. Tala didn't offer pity. Instead, she watched him with a steady, knowing calm. "A spirit can't heal in the dark," she said softly. "It needs someone to see it." Even once, Elias cleared his throat, pretending to busy himself with the kettle, but her words lingered in the room like smoke. That night, as the wind howled and the fire cracked and popped, Elias realized he hadn't felt this awake, this seen in years, and he wasn't sure whether it comforted or frightened him. When the storm finally broke, it did so quietly, no warning, no thunderous announcement. Elias stepped outside at dawn and found the world washed, clean beneath a pale morning sky. The snow had stopped, leaving drifts piled high, like the backs of sleeping animals, and the red river gleamed faintly in the distance. The air was sharp, but no longer murderous. A man could breathe in it without wincing. Tala joined him on the porch, her breath forming small clouds that drifted away as quickly as they appeared. Her cloak had dried and regained its weight, her hair newly braided, her stance strong again. She looked whole, more whole than when she'd arrived, but there was something bittersweet in her eyes. "My people will move on soon," she said, scanning the horizon. "If I follow their tracks north, I will find them." Elias nodded, though a strange tightness pulled at his chest. He had known this moment was coming, yet knowing hadn't softened it. "You're sure you're strong enough?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Tala's lips curved into a small, wry smile. "Stronger than when I knocked on your door." They saddled their horses together, his old mare, Dusty, and the spare gelding he kept for emergencies. Tala moved with practiced ease, though she paused once, resting a hand on the saddle horn, as if steadying something inside herself. Elias watched her, quiet. The cabin behind him suddenly felt older than ever, like a relic from a life already lived and abandoned. At the riverbank, where ice shimmered thinly atop the water, Tala stopped and turned to him. "You could ride south," she said. "There's warmth there, people, life." Her gaze softened. "Silence can keep you alive for a time, but it cannot keep you human." The words hit him harder than the winter wind ever had. He looked back toward the cabin, his fortress, his prison, his shelter. 9 years of grief had seeped into the wooden beams like smoke. Maybe too much of him had seeped into it as well. He took a slow breath, feeling something ease inside him. "Reckon I've stared at that same horizon long enough," he said, fastening Dusty's bridle. "Time I saw what's past it." Tala's eyes brightened, not surprised but relieved, as though she had hoped he would choose this path. Side by side they guided their horses across the clearing. The snow crunched beneath the hooves, the sky opened above them, and the prairie stretched out like a second chance. Elias didn't know where the trail would lead, but for the first time in 9 long years, he was willing to find out.